Hello, welcome to my video, and I'm going to show you a pretty nice game from a European Championship for women. And this is played between Stavrula Tsolakidu, who was white, and Marina Gajcin, who was black. We have this position, and at the moment black's d6 pawn is in big danger. But here black took on a4. And black is a pawn up. But the problem is, if the d6 pawn somehow drops in a few moves, it's gonna leave the c5 pawn weak as well. It's like a domino effect. If d6 falls, then c5 is quite weak, and that's why white plays bishop g4, trying to eliminate the knight on f5 and then to capture on d6. So, as a very logical response, black plays rook d8. So she is anticipating bishop f5, this, knight d6, by just simply capturing and surviving this position. This should be okay for black, because next comes bishop d7, and black should cover all the squares on which white's rook can enter. So, what to do as white here? White took on f5, and after black took on f5, now she went back to g3, attacking this now weak pawn on f5. And how to defend the pawn? Well, black went for bishop d7, the most logical response, once again, and this is the key moment in the game, and I found this move really beautiful. To disconnect the bishop and the rook, white played rook e6, which is amazing. And now, eventually, the f5 pawn is going to drop, but it's not the only point of this move, because e6 pawn is going to be weak, and black here took on e6. If she goes queen f7 maybe, then the d6 pawn drops and the position remains very tough to defend. So black chose to take on e6, and after d, now a very obvious threat is knight takes f5 and e7 with a fork. Let's say black plays something random like b6. Now you take on f5, and the e-passed pawn is going to be very dangerous. So after d6, black tried to just capture this pawn immediately, and now can you find a move for white? If you found a move queen e2, you were right. For example, here, queen d5 is a bad move, because even though knight f5 is a strong threat, it can be met by rook e8, and now the e6 pawn is dropping without too much play for white. So, what's the difference between queen e2 and queen d5? Well, let's go back. Queen e2, black plays the same, rook e8. But now after knight takes f5, queen takes e6, what do you play as white? You play queen g4. And now you attack the bishop on g7. And now black has several options, but only one keeps black in the game. So if you go queen f7, now what do? You go knight h6, and you fork the queen and the king. What happens if you go queen d7? Well, the same story, knight h6, and you take on d7 next. So the only move that defends the bishop is rook e7. And now black hopes for something like knight takes e7, queen takes e7, and trying to survive this. Maybe black is even better in this position, so the whole point was not to return the exchange back. And now the killer move here was bishop takes d6. And let's go back a bit. So in this position, black successfully saves herself from threats like queen g7, knight h6, because the queen on e6 is defended. But at the moment, the rook on e7 has two jobs, defending g7 and e6, and it's like a red flag for black, because it means that black's rook only needs one push to abandon one piece. So that's why bishop d6 is so successful here, so effective, because now the rook has to move. But if it moves to f7 or d7, let's say d7, then once again we have this idea, knight h6, and the queen is lost. If rook f7, then the same, knight h6, and the queen is lost again. Here, if rook e8, then you take on g7 with the queen. So it's not a good position for black, so she gave a check on e1, but now after king h2, at least now after rook d7, knight h6 is not losing a queen, but it still works. Knight h6 here, and now the rook hangs on d7. And after this, there is a nice sequence of moves. Queen d8, king g7, and now can you find the win for white? Well, it's bishop f8. And now the only square which doesn't lose the bishop, the only move is king g6. And now the final check, queen d3. After which black resigned, because if you go f5, you have queen d6 and you lose the bishop. And if you go for king g5, then there is queen g3 at least. And then on king h5, to keep defending the bishop, there is a checkmate on g4. And also here, if king h5 immediately, well, you can just do the same, give a check on f3 and, well, not really, right? Maybe just queen f5, yeah. Queen f5, and if bishop g5, give a check, and on the next move is checkmate. Or if you go king h4, of course, this is checkmate. So after queen d3, black resigned, and this is a finish to a really beautiful sequence, which began with knight e4, but it had its peak at rook e6, which I found quite nice, disconnecting the bishop and the pawn, and causing lots of trouble, because both bishops were pretty bad at the moment. But also the reason why this worked is because the rook is quite passive in this position, and also the bishop on g7 was dead from the beginning. So there was some factor like that. Also, maybe black should have played bishop h6 in the beginning of this this nice sequence, but even then you can take on h6, take, and take on d6, just a small deflection tool. If black takes, then queen takes h6, and if bishop a4, which is quite bad, you have rook e6, and this rook is never going to abandon black's camp. So if queen d8, just d6, and things become very unpleasant for black, because in the end you might even put your rook on e7. So this is also bad, and that means that after this move, that black is just a pawn down, and it's not a pleasant position to hold. Also, maybe even stronger was in this position to play b4, to play for the queenside break. And now the point is, if you take on b4, queen takes, now d6 and b7 are hanging, and black is in lots of trouble in that case. So let's go back here. Why does this work? Well, it works specifically because the rook is overloaded. After bishop e6, de, queen e7, queen e2, rook e8, and this. If somehow you had queen on d7 and the rook on d8, it would be all right, because knight h6 doesn't do anything in particular. But in this case, after rook e7, the rook is just overloaded, and after bishop d6, black is gonna lose the piece. And also it helps that the b7 pawn is, well, it doesn't matter, but yeah. Because even if rook had b7 at disposal, knight h6 still works. So it was a pretty nice combination here. After this, and bishop f8, and this check. Okay, that's it. I'm gonna show you one more nice tactic from this position, and I'm gonna give you a few seconds to solve it. So, if you found white to move, it's white to move. White to move, and what does he play? Can you tell me? Well, if you found rook g1, you were right. Because now, black has a very tough choice. Does he go to h8, to f7? Does he take? If black goes to f7, there is rook g7, and on king f6, you give one more check. And then the rook is lost. Or on king f5, you can do something even better. You can skewer the queen and the king and finish the game. Also, what happens if king h8? Well, what do you do? Bishop g7, king g8, and now you don't discover check, because then black takes on g1, king g1, and king f8, and black survives. You give a check on d5, and now after rook f7, which is the only move, now you have one more check, and the bishop on g7 proves to be a fatal piece for black. And now there's no coverage on f8 because you just simply take, and that's game over. So king moves are not helping, but I think they're the best chance. If black takes on g1, which happened in the game, you have queen d5 check. And now if rook f7, once again, we have queen a8 check, and again, the bishop on h6 is very good. Rook f8, queen takes, and checkmate. So black would have to go to h8, but now queen d4. Once again, there's no coverage on the long diagonal, so if you go here, queen g7. And that was the point why rook g1 was necessary, because after immediate queen d5, king h8 would still threaten the checkmate. on h2, and there is no check on d4. So by rook g1, the knight was deflected from f3, and white is allowed to have a check on d5, and then d4, which is the crucial check. King g8, queen g7, checkmate. That was it, guys, and I'll see you soon.